All right, hello everyone. I'm here with Philip Goff, philosopher at Durham. Uh, Philip has written about lots of very interesting subjects. He's a philosophy professor. He thinks atoms are little people. Slight exaggeration. He's a somewhat heretical Christian. Very interesting guy. And so he's reappearing. Philip, thanks for appearing on.
Thanks for having me on, Matthew. My favorite podcast for techie philosophy. One of my favorites. Is it my favorite? Is it my absolute favorite? Certainly one of my favorites. Certainly up there. You okay?
Yeah, I'm doing well.
Should we talk about some stuff then?
Yeah, I mean, as lots of people, they have various questions concerning, the view that consciousness is ubiquitous in the universe, whether there's a limited God, etc. But we're here to talk about the important stuff, okay? Whether inferring a multiverse from fine-tuning commits the inverse Gambor's fallacy. I think it does not. Philip thinks it does. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about. This is like part 9 of us having conversations about this, but I think part 3, to be more precise. But we haven't reached agreement yet, and so hopefully, one of us will convince the other in this conversation.
Yeah, well, I've maybe changed my mind a bit on this, which I'm talking about publicly for the first time here. I might, at the moment, I'm kind of thinking that, with a slightly more nuanced view, that if you're comparing atheistic hypotheses and you're comparing single universe with multiverse, then the fine-tuning supports the multiverse atheism over single universe atheism. But if you're comparing multiverse atheism and single universe theism, then the fine-tuning supports single universe theism over multiverse atheism. That's what I'm currently thinking, for kind of the same reasons. I'm slightly hesitant because I've been talking a lot to Kenny Boyce. I don't know Kenny Boyce, who's doing really hardcore mathematical frameworks for thinking about this stuff, and I want to sit down and read the latest thing he sent me, which I'm going to need to find a day free where I can wade through the mathematics he sent me. And so maybe he can persuade me that actually the inverse gambler stuff in its purer form is correct, where it just says, it doesn't support the multiverse at all. Fine-tuning doesn't support the multiverse. So I'm still open to that. So I'm conditional on reading what Kenny sent me. But at the moment, I'm thinking that slightly more concessionary view. Okay, shall I explain why I'm thinking that?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I'll just talk for 5 minutes or something. All right, well, just as you know, Matthew, as we all know, sorry, there's slightly simplified slides because I was just talking about this to a general audience. School kids, actually. So as you know, kind of the core of Bayesian reasoning is all things being equal, go for the hypothesis that makes the evidence most probable. All things aren't always equal because of priors. Let's just kind of set that on one side. So simple example, robbers break into a bank and guess the 6-digit combination right first time. We're comparing 2 hypotheses. 1, they just guessed. And 2, they had inside information. Well, you're going to go for the latter because it makes the evidence more probable, right? It's like the evidence is they guessed correctly. That's much more probable if they had inside information, much more expected, if you like, than if they just guessed. How do I change the slides now? Oh, yeah. So then you're building that into the same principle, defending God. Then we contrast. So our evidence is that the numbers in physics are just right for life. And then 2 hypotheses. Naturalism, which I understand as the view that value plays no role in shaping fundamental reality. And then theism, God designed the universe. Lots more options we might consider. That I'm open to considering options, but let's just consider these 2 possibilities. Well, it looks like the evidence supports the God hypothesis because on naturalism, it's really improbable that you get the right numbers for life. On theism, it's not inevitable, but it's more expected. Okay, there's so much, so familiar. Oh yeah, I just thought I showed the school kids this, that guessing the 6-digit combination right is 1 in a million. Conservative estimate of getting the right numbers for life by chance, 1 in 10 to the 134. So it's nice to contrast. Sometimes these can be kind of abstract probabilities, and you think, oh, it could be fluke, whatever. But you take a concrete example and you say that would never be fluke, and then see, well, this is much, much more improbable. All right, okay. But then the thought is, well, there's another explanation, the multiverse. Why? If you're not enough universes, one of them's gonna fluke the right numbers for life. Okay, so let me introduce another principle that I've made up, trying to explain this to school kids. We can get into the mathematics, which I'm going to, but maybe a principle might introduce in a more intuitive way. So we've just been talking about the likelihood principle, that all things being equal, go for the hypothesis that makes the evidence most probable. Here I'm now introducing the specificity principle. If you can make probable the specifics of your evidence, right? So let me give an example, an analogy to motivate that. We can motivate it with the mathematics, but motivate it initially with intuitions. So natural selection, right? Important, well-supported scientific theory. But what does it explain? I would say, it explains that we have some kind of complex life forms, right? It makes that probable, given certain initial conditions. But it doesn't make it probable, doesn't explain in that sense the very specific life forms we have, like elephants, tigers, etc., right? It makes probable you're going to get some, on another planet, maybe there's evolution and natural selection, you get very different life forms. Okay, now that's fine. That's fine because this specificity principle is like all things being equal, if you can, right? If you can explain it. So in this case, you're explaining the generalities that, some complex life, you're not explaining the specifics, but okay, that's all right. That's all right. But imagine now that some rival theory to natural selection comes along that makes it probable not only that you'll have some complex life forms, but that you'll have pretty much the specific ones we find, like elephants, tigers, human beings, etc. Well, that would be a better theory, intuitively, right? It would be a better theory, and we go for that rather than natural selection because it predicts the specificities of our data. Okay, so I want to say pretty much the same principle supports single universe theism over multiverse theory. Okay, so we want to say, okay, multiverse theory makes it likely that some universe is fine-tuned, but leaves it to chance which. So it makes probable the sort of the generalities of our evidence, just like natural selection makes it probable that there are some complex life forms. But now single universe theism does better than that because it makes likely the specificities of our evidence that this universe is fine-tuned. That's part of our evidence, right? That's getting into the more specifics of our evidence that this particular universe is fine-tuned. So multiverse theory just makes like, okay, some universe can be fine-tuned, but it leaves it incredibly improbable that it's this one, which is part of our evidence, but single universe theism makes it probable that this one is fine-tuned, right? Because single universe theism says, only this, there's only this universe, and God exists. That makes it not so unexpected that you get the right values for life. So preempt an objection here. I mean, neither theory explains why this universe exists, right? As opposed to some other universe. So neither theory is making probable all the specifics, but that's fine. As I said, the likelihood principle, the specificity principle says, if you can if you can. It's a better theory if you can make probable the specificities. So here's a specificity that neither theory can make probable, that this universe exists. Nonetheless, given that this universe exists, single universe theism makes it likely that this universe is fine-tuned, whereas multiverse theory doesn't make it likely that this universe is fine-tuned. It makes it likely some universe is fine-tuned. So to put it another way, single universe theism removes an improbability that multiverse theory leaves present, leaves there. And so it's a better so it's much more strongly it's the better theory. Just as this imaginary rival to natural selection, if it existed, would be better than natural selection. I mean, that doesn't mean that there isn't such a theory. And while there isn't such a theory, we should go for natural selection. I just want to clarify, I'm not doubting natural selection here as the best theory we've got. I'm just saying, if there was this imaginary rival theory, that would be better than natural selection, that made probable the exact life form is fine. Likewise, we do have these two theories, multiverse and single universe theism. Single universe theism is the better one because it renders probable the specificities of our evidence. Okay, well, let's bring in the maths rather than just intuitions. So this is very much influenced by Paul Draper. I had this equation in a much more elegant form before we went live, but it wasn't showing it. So I just sort of cut and pasted it in a funny way. Okay, so here we got G is single universe theism. Oh yeah, G for God. I was thinking, what's the G for? M is multiverse hypothesis. Okay, what Paul Draper does in his 2010 papers is there is a way of separating out the more specific evidence from the more general evidence, and how that works out in sort of probability mathematics is the stronger evidence is equal to the weaker evidence times the stronger evidence given the weaker evidence. Okay, so here. So the first, so we've got like three lines here, three bits of the equation. The first one is our evidence, the strongest evidence, the specifics of our evidence. The second one is the second ratio here is the way it's framed now is the probability of the probability that some universes, so it's a probability of the generality, some universe is fine-tuned given God, single universe God, and some universe is fine-tuned given multiverse. Now, I actually think on this second bit of the equation, the multiverse wins because, at least if there's enough universes, it's pretty much inevitable statistically. One of them's going to be fine-tuned. Whereas if just because God exists, it's not inevitable that God's going to make a fine-tuned universe. They might not want to create life for it. So I think the multiverse theory wins there. But where multiverse theory loses is in the third and final part after the multiplication sign there, which is the probability that this universe is fine-tuned given that some universe is fine-tuned. Okay, and so if we're thinking about single universe theism, then given that some universe is fine-tuned, it's logically entailed that this universe is fine-tuned because it's the only universe that exists. Whereas if we're talking about the multiverse hypothesis, given that some universe is fine-tuned, it's still ludicrously improbable that it's this one. And so, and then you multiply them together. So you end up with vastly, vastly stronger support. You end up with strong support for single universe theism over multiverse atheism. Very finally, I've talked longer. I always talk longer than I expected. But let's just think about what about the scientific evidence? People say, whenever I say this, people say, but there's scientific evidence for multiverse. So let's pretend, it's obviously controversial. Let's say there is scientific evidence for eternal inflation, that there's this sort of mega universe that's always expanding very rapidly, and then bits of it slow down to form bubble universes, and we're one of those bubble universes. Okay, let's say there's scientific evidence for that. The scientific evidence is supposed to be that we've got strong evidence for inflation, that our universe began with this rapid expansion. And once you sort of think through how this would connect to quantum mechanics and other stuff, eternal inflation looks like the most probable way of spelling that out. Okay, so let's suppose we've got evidence for eternal inflation. But look, there's two versions of eternal inflation: homogeneous and heterogeneous. Homogeneous, that most or all of the universes are fine-tuned, that they've all got roughly the same physics. Or heterogeneous eternal inflation, that there's great, which is the more standard one that people talk about, that there's great variety in the local physics of each universe. So very, very small percentage of the universes are fine-tuned. Okay, right, now we're comparing those and bring in our specificity principle. If you can, make probable the specifics of your evidence. Well, that's going to favor homogeneous, isn't it? Because on the heterogeneous eternal inflation, it's wildly improbable that this universe is fine-tuned, and that's part of our evidence. That's the specificities of our evidence. So homogeneous makes probable that some universe is fine-tuned, but it doesn't make probable that this universe is fine-tuned. So you've got evidence for heterogeneous over, homogeneous, strong support for homogeneous over heterogeneous. And then I would say at that point, you're left with strong support for God, as perhaps another, you could put it as another step. This is the bit I just find very, very finally, I always find hardest to pin scientists down on. Like, I'm very clear, sort of, on what the evidence is for eternal inflation, but why heterogeneous over homogeneous? And people say things about string theory, and Sean Carroll said to me something in an email about quantum tunneling that I've never heard anyone say before. But I'm never clear whether string theory is supposed to be it's a way of making sense of it, or it makes it more like, more theoretically plausible or something. Anyway, even if there is some theoretical reasons to go for heterogeneous over homogeneous, I mean, my suspicion is people are just trying to deal with fine-tuning. But suppose there is some independent reason to think heterogeneous is more plausible. Well, still, you want to explain the evidence. You want to make the evidence probable, the specificities of your evidence as well as the generalities. So I think those kind of theoretical considerations would just pale into insignificance in terms of, just bloody explaining the data. All right, that's everything I've got to say.
Yeah, so let me start with some areas of agreement. So first of all, I agree that, one thing that some people say in response is they say, no, you don't take the total evidence. You just take the fact that there is a life-permitting universe. This is, I think, a huge mistake. I think the total evidence principle is right, that you take the most specific version of the evidence. And second, with respect to your last slide, I think if you had homogeneous eternal inflation, that would still be strong evidence for theism, because you need fine-tuning with respect to the value that the internal inflation sets all the universe constants to. So it's surprising that it sets all of them to the fine-tuned range. I guess the bit that I disagree with is, and maybe you could go back to the last slide, I disagree with the idea that the probability of this universe being fine-tuning, given that some universe is life-permitting, is lower given naturalism than given theism. Given a multiverse than given single universe theism. So let me describe just a few.
Just say the sentence again, Matthew, just to make 100% I'm on board with you.
So what I deny is that the probability that this universe would be finely tuned given single universe theism is lower than the probability that this universe would be finely tuned. Sorry, is higher, than the probability that this universe would be finely tuned given a multiverse.
Okay.
So let me just first describe one reason to be suspicious of this, and then I'll describe a few ways of interpreting the inference, and then explain why I think that none of them work. So one reason to be suspicious, if you notice that you should be suspicious whenever you get the following form of the evidence. Whenever you think, X is not evidence for Y, but any specific version of X is going to be evidence for Y. So if you end up thinking, well, that I'm in the hotel is no evidence for some theory, but for any specific room I find myself in, that's always evidence for the theory. That's a reason to be suspicious. Why? Because it violates a principle of probability called reflection, where reflection says that after learning some new evidence, you shouldn't, on average, expect your credence to rise. It shouldn't be that no matter what you learn, you think your credence will go up. And so imagine that you've learned, you know that there is a life permitting universe, but you don't know that you're in this one yet. It just hasn't occurred to you yet. And so you think, well, now no matter what I learn, I have no evidence for theism over a multiverse from the fact that there is one. But after I learn that it's this one, no matter which one this one is, I'll get an update. And so that's something to be a bit suspicious of. That hasn't diagnosed the problem, but that just explains a reason to be suspicious. So now I think the core.
Carry on talking. I'm just going to try and
core probabilistic error.
Looks
like I'm coming back. So I think the core probabilistic error is that that I don't think that the odds of this universe being life permitting is higher given theism than given a multiverse. So one way in which you might think it's higher, what you might have in mind when you talk about this universe is you might be thinking a universe like with exactly the atomic properties of our universe. So with our laws of physics, with our initial conditions, and so on. But there's no reason to think that's any likelier given theism than multiverse. On both of them, the probability distribution over the laws and the initial conditions are equal. Okay, so it can't be that. Now, here's I think what the proposal is supposed to be. The idea is, well, think about, let's say you have a multiverse where there's a billion universes and only one of them is finely tuned. Well, it's surprising that this one in specific is finely tuned. Like, let's say this is universe. Let's just give each of them a number. Let's say this is universe 633. What's surprising that universe 633, that's the one that's finely tuned. It's the odds of that are 1 in a billion. So I think that's what the proposal is supposed to be.
Yes.
Okay? But this, I think, it's a very subtle probabilistic error. So here's an analogous case. So let's imagine there are two theories. And theory one is that you're teleported into a small casino into a small hotel with only one room. Okay. And theory two is that you're teleported into a large hotel with lots and lots of different rooms. Okay. So so now you're teleported, into the hotel and you don't know what room you're in. And we ask, does this give you any evidence for the first theory over the second theory? Well, I think it clearly doesn't, right? You haven't learned anything new that both theories predict you going into the hotel, and you have no special evidence. But you could make the same inference. What you could say is that, well, look, if theory one's true, then I have to be in this room. Well, if theory two is true, it's a huge hotel, so I could be in any of the different rooms. So I get a big update for theory one. Okay, but I think that's a mistake. Why is it a mistake? Because which room you're in is not part of your evidence. You don't know which room you're in. And so overall, what you have to do is you have to split your credence over all the rooms you might be in. When you do that in the hotel case, then if there are 1,000 rooms and each theory starts with a prior of 0.5, then there'll be like 50% prior that you're in room one, in the only room, and the first theory is true. And then 50 over 1,000%, I think that's 0.5%, or 0.05. I don't know, whatever. Wait, I guess, no, that's 5%. Wait, what? Okay, anyways, whatever the odds are, that you're in any of the specific rooms. And so then when you divvy up the probabilities, you don't get any outcome, because it's just the different rooms you might be in have each sort of soaked up some share of the overall 50% probability. In similar fashion with the multiverse theory, it's not part of our evidence which room we're in. We don't know which room we're in. So if there's one theory in which there's a single universe that's life permitting, and one theory in which there are, say, 100,000 universes, and one of them is life permitting, well, what you should think is we don't know what room we're in. We don't know if we're in room 633 or 788 or room one. And so there's a 50% chance roughly that you're in room one, that you're in universe one, and the single universe is true, assuming they have equal priors. And then the 50% chance of the multiverse is evenly divvied up across the 100,000 universes that you might be in, and you don't know which one you're in. Now, I want to note that this doesn't violate reflection in any way, because it's not like we're not taking into account the fact that you're in some room. The point is, we don't know which room in particular we don't know in particular which of the universes that you're in. You know you're in this one, but you don't know which of the universes, like which number, say, this universe would get. Now, if you did, well, if you learned that you were in universe 1, then you'd get a big update in favor of the single universe hypothesis, because it's super likely you'd be in universe 1 given that. But in contrast, if you learn that you're in universe, say, 2 or 3 or any number more than 1, then it straightforwardly confirms the multiverse. So that's kind of my basic take, that I think that when you think about the probabilities correctly and note your uncertainty about where you are, you end up not getting any update.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, one thing I didn't say in my presentation is the total evidence requirement, that you should work with the most specific evidence you have, which is what is driving this, and I'm glad we agree on. I mean, just another thing in the background here that, you know, is what's motivating a lot of this for me, and maybe let's not get into it now, but is how we rule out confirmation in the classic inverse gamblers case that well, maybe I will ask you how you, I don't know which rabbit holes.
No, I think that might be a good one to talk about. Yeah,
you go into a casino, you just see some random person, right? Let's call him Bob. You know, you see a random person winning big. Now, it wouldn't be rational to infer, oh, the casino must be full, right? Just this first person you've seen. But why not? Because you'd say, well, what I've observed is someone's won big, and if the casino is full, it's more likely that someone would win big. Now, the way to rule that out is to bring in well, my evidence is not that someone won big, it's that this person won big. I mean, you know, what I've been wrestling with for years now is, so that's that. In that case, you can't infer to a full casino. But now here's a case where you can infer to a full casino. Like, you're outside the casino and you're going to get dragged in when someone wins big. You know, the boss of the casino is going to drag you in, right? So you get dragged in very quickly. Well, in that case, you do have evidence that someone's won big, right? Intuitively. So, you know, it's how we that's what I've been wrestling with a million years, is how we, and I think I've got a way of distinguishing these two cases now. But
so sorry, go.
No, go on. Maybe say something about that, and then I'll cut. But I would like to come back to the case, the hotel case you've raised. But go on. Do you want to say anything about that?
I think that with these cases, like, it's important. You know, Draper has this nice paper where he goes through various alleged counterexamples to the total evidence requirement. He doesn't think any of them work, where you have to be very precise about what the update is. And so that's what I think is true here. Okay, so let me start with the first case and explaining why you do update. Don't update, rather. So you enter a casino, you see someone wins big. Do you update in favor of thinking the casino's larger? No. Why not? Well, it's true that the probability that someone wins big in the casino is higher if the casino's larger. But the probability that the person right in front of you would win big is exactly the same. So if you take in, so let's just to do the math, let's update on two facts. First is someone wins big in the casino. And that's much likelier if it's a bigger casino. And so you get an update in favor of, if all you knew was that someone won big, you'd get an update in favor of that. But you don't just know that. You know that the person right in front of you won big. Well, so then you update on the second fact, which is the person in front of me won big, given that someone in the casino won big. Well, the probability of that is exactly the inverse of the size of the casino. Like, if the casino has 100,000 rooms, then given that someone won, well, this would only barely confirm that the person right in front of me won. And so the two probabilities necessarily exactly cancel out. And so then you don't get any update in favor of the person right in front of you having won in the room. Because the idea is if the casino is larger, you get a bigger confirmation that someone won, but then that proportionately reduces the confirmation that the person in front of you won. And if you work out the math, these things cancel out. Now, why doesn't this apply to the case where you're like summoned into the room where they have where like if someone gets lucky, in poker, then you're summoned into the room. Okay, you do get summoned, and so you get evidence that the casino is larger. Well, for that one, so first someone won, and you agree that's vastly likelier given that it's larger rather than smaller. But then you update on this specific person won. And this one, I actually think it's very closely parallel to the multiverse. The point is that, so if it's true that if it's a larger hotel, like let's say that the person who won was in room 1,000 or something. Well, if you had in your background exactly like which person they were, if you knew who they were, then you would get actually, sorry, let me scratch that statement. Ignore the last sentence. Strike it from the record. So you don't actually know which room the person is in, and so you just have to take into account your uncertainty over the rooms they're in. And so when you take into account your uncertainty over which room it is, then the initial slice of probability space is equally divvied up. Is equally divvied up over it. So the idea is that that in the first case, because you're only looking at one room, the probability that someone won, given that person won, is lower. While in the second case, the probability that person won, given that someone won, is it doesn't cancel out the first update.
Why doesn't it cancel out? I don't
get
what
so why. So why is it the fact that so let's see. So the hypothesis is the casino is larger versus the casino is smaller. And you agree that the fact that the casino is larger makes it so that it's likelier that someone in the casino would win. So then the question is, why does the fact that why does that proportionally lower the probability that that person won, given that someone in the casino won? It isn't as if you like knew about the person ahead of time. If ahead of time you knew about, like, let's say your friend went into the casino ahead of time, and then you were summoned into the room with your friend. Well, then you would get no update.
Yeah, but you don't know the person in either case. So let's call it the basic case where you just walk in and you see Bob. You don't know who the hell it is. You see Bob winning big. Okay. And then where you get, let's call it the summoning case, when you get summoned in. So in either case, you don't know this person. So why can't I say in the summoning case, someone's won big, but then that's cancelled out because, well, how likely is it that it's with this person right in front of me?
Well, the idea is that, so conditional on, so imagine that all you knew is that someone won big. Okay. Then you would still think it's really unlikely that because there's a selection effect. If all you knew is that someone won big, you'd think it's really unlikely that the person who won big would be the person who you walked into the room for, right? So if all you knew is that someone somewhere in the casino had won big, you'd think, well, okay, but it's super unlikely that whoever it is that I walk in to and see when I enter the casino, that person won big. It's not the same with the summoning case, because you know that if someone wins big, well, it's guaranteed that whoever you see will be one who will have won big.
Right.
And then there's no additional fee. So it's like that the person you see has these properties, is higher probability in the summoning case than in the other case. And then there's no aspects of the specificity of that person that give you an update aside from that you're the one that they see.
Tell me why why is fine-tuning more like, so why is the real world fine-tuning case more like the summoning case in your view?
Well, you couldn't, among other things, you couldn't have found yourself in a universe that wasn't life permitting.
And that's the anthropic intuition, isn't it? But I want to know, like, how does that fit into the
well, sorry. So the distinction is that in the summoning case, there's a selection effect, right? Where you can only find yourself in a case where the event happened, and so then if we think about the summoning case as being analogous to as the many rooms hypothesis as being like the multiverse, and then we compare that to there's one room but the guy's cheating, and that's a single universe hypothesis. Well, both theories predict you would be summoned into the room, and so in both cases the idea is there's a selection effect in this case in a way there's not in the other case, because I
know there's a selection effect, but why does it? So let's just come back to this cancellation that you're alleging in the basic case is because, okay, I know someone's won big, and then a big casino, full casino makes that likely, but then given that someone won big, how likely is it that this guy in front of me is the one that's won big? That's the cancellation. So why can't I do that in the fine-tuning case, right? Some universe being fine-tuned, multiverse makes that probable. Okay, but now, given that some universe is fine-tuned, how likely is it that it's this one? Cancellation. What's the difference?
Sorry, I think you cut out for a second, but I think I got the question.
So say it again in case.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Need to hear it. So it seems to me analogous. You're saying in the basic casino case, we all agree is an error. Matthew's saying someone won big that's made probable by a full casino. But given that someone won big, how likely is it that Bob won big? This chap who's I've never met before is just standing in front of me. That's really improbable. So there's cancellation. I'm saying in the multiverse, in the fine-tuning case, why isn't it the same? The multiverse makes it probable that some universe is fine-tuned, but given that some universe is fine-tuned, how likely is it that this one cancellation? That's really improbable, so they cancel out.
Right. So in both cases, you don't know which universe this one is. It is true that given the multiverse hypothesis, you should think the probability that this one
Pause on that statement. You don't know which universe it is. Well, in what sense do I know? Is that true? But I do know who Bob is. I mean, all I can do is point. He might be under a sheet. Let's say Bob is under a sheet. I don't know who the hell he is. All I can say is this guy won big.
Right. So
it's exactly the same as all I can say about the universe is it's this one. It's this one. Okay, so what's the difference between, you said you don't know which universe you're in. Well, I would say to the extent that that's true, it's also true about the guy who's just won big in the basic casino case.
Yeah. I that wasn't the complete answer. It's not just right, because you could enter the casino case and you don't know who the guy is, but nonetheless you get an update if the person who you walk in is the person who wins. So what I'm saying is that I'm granting that the probability that this universe is finely tuned, given a multiverse, is very low. If all you knew was that there was a multiverse, you'd be surprised that it would happen to be this universe that's finely tuned. But I'm saying that's analogous to in the case where you're summoned into a random room, where there are two hypotheses, one of which summons you into a random room, one of which summons you into room 1, and then you're summoned into a room, you don't know what room it is. I'm saying it's analogous to in that case, there's a sense in which on the hypothesis that you're summoned into a random room, you should think, well, it's really surprising I'm in this room. But the point is, when you take into account all the different rooms that you might currently be in, you don't get any overall update. Now, I want to be clear on exactly what the difference is between the multiverse case and the like you just go into a room and you see that it happens. The idea is that, so in the multiverse case, you had to find yourself so in the multiverse case, there's a selection effect, just like there is in the summoning into a room case. And then I'm saying, when there's a selection effect, what you do is you divvy up your credence across, conditional on the theory, across the people you might be given the theory. And you don't know which of them you are. So conditional...
Okay, this is the bit, where does this come from? Right, so I mean, just to get... Sorry to interrupt, but just to pin that... So we all agree there's a selection effect. What I'm saying is the selection effect doesn't impact anything we're interested in here. And I want to know why. So you're bringing up this principle now that when there is a selection effect, you...
So the reason for this is that you have to take into account... so you have to take into... There are kind of two factors you update on. First is such and such event happened somewhere. And then second is such and such event happened here. Okay, so when you take into account, so you start by saying, what's the probability that someone in the and let me walk through the math in each case and then explain why it works differently. Okay, so in the first case where you enter the room and you see the person got a royal flush, it's true that the odds that would happen, given that there's a multiverse somewhere, are vastly higher. But given that there's a multiverse, for all you know, it may have happened in any of the rooms. And so you should think it's very unlikely, for whichever room you walked into, you should think it's very unlikely that it would happen in that particular room. So as a result, the fact that it did is surprising. The two probabilities cancel out. In the summoning case, And so just a thing to note about the first case. In that case, you could have gotten disconfirmation of the theory. If you had walked in and you had known that it happened somewhere in the hotel, you could have found it not happening to you, right? You could have walked in and had it not happen. In the summoning case, so the only relevant room is the one that you walk into by chance, where they get a royal flush, and there being more rooms doesn't affect the probability it would happen there. In the summoning case, so you get summoned into whichever room it happens, and so then you think, well, look, the fact that it happens somewhere, this gives me no update, right? Because the fact that it happens somewhere, it does give me an update. And then you think, well, so I don't know in some I don't know what room number this one happens to be. And so, given that it happened somewhere, I don't think the odds it would happen here are any higher in light of the casino being small than in light of the casino being large. So in that case, you get the first update, but not the second update.
Yeah, but you do know, because it's here. It's this person. You could point to them. You can point, it's this person. So in the summoning case, you can point to it. It's this person. So I'm saying, why don't you get the cancellation? Because it's incredibly, just let me finish, incredibly improbable that this person won. And you're saying something like, well, you don't know where here is, or you don't know where this person is. Well, you do, in the sense that you can point to them. And that's exactly the same sense you have in the basic case. You can point to them and you can say this person. So so obviously I feel there is a difference here, but I don't think you're pointing to the difference, because I don't think you're pointing to a difference. That's what I'm saying. I don't think what you're pointing to is a difference between the two cases. And then you came up with some, well, go on. Wait,
sorry. So the question is why? So right. So the difference is not that it's not known that you're here in this particular case. Because I agree that once you know that you are, sorry, wait, let me think about a good way of phrasing it. Yeah. So the difference is not that in the first case you know you're here, and in the second case you don't know you're here. The difference is that so in the first case, it's surprising that whichever place the person got the royal flush, given that it was occurred somewhere, is the place right in front of you. In contrast, in the second case, it's not surprising that it's right in front of you because there's a selection effect. And then when you take into account your uncertainty about where you are, then, taking into account the more specific fact of, okay, it occurred in front of me, but it occurred here in front of me, that won't give you an update. Sorry, I think,
Listen, so of course, there is that selection effect difference, right? There is the difference that in the summoning case, it was inevitable that you were going to see the person. It's not surprising that the person you're seeing is, okay. What I want to know is, why does that mean the cancellation doesn't happen? Right? Because in both cases, I can say, okay, somebody won, and that's made more probable by a full casino. But given that someone won, it's really improbable that this person won. I can say that in both cases. So,
right. So I
want to know why. Of course, there is that difference, but why does that mean the cancellation happens in one case but not the other?
So I typed out in the chat what I think are the three stages. So first is the probability it happens somewhere. Second is the probability it happens in front of me, given that it happens somewhere. And third is the probability it happens here, given that it's in front of me and somewhere. So my claim is that in the summoning case, the second term is very low. The probability it happens in front of me, given that it happens somewhere. And so that's what cancels out the update on the first term. Right. And then I'm saying in neither case is there an update on the third term. So the difference is in respect to the probability of it happens in front of me, given that it happens somewhere.
Okay, this is actually getting close to sort of how I've been kind of thinking about the difference between the two cases. But now let's come to my new view that okay, you do get some multiverse confirmation, but you get kind of more of a confirmation for theism because, okay, so you're agreeing, right? In the summoning case, there's still something that's improbable, right? So yes, okay. In the summoning case, let's focus on that. It was inevitable that the person you're seeing is the winner, right? Because you were dragged in, you were going to be dragged in only when someone won. But there's still something improbable that it's this person, and you can point at them, right? Now imagine we had another theory that actually made it probable that this person would win. Maybe the theory is that they're the partner of, the person running the lottery or something, the person running the casino, and then you start to get, they might have been cheating, and so then there's a theory. Well, then okay, but then we should go for that theory over full casino because it makes it likely that this person would win. So that's what I'm now saying about the difference between theism and the multiverse. So I'm tempted to say, yes, you get some confirmation. You get some confirmation for the multiverse because it removes some improbabilities. Let's put it vaguely like that. But it still leaves something improbable that this universe would be fine-tuned, whereas theism doesn't leave you with that improbability.
Yeah. So I don't think that's correct because it's true that if there was a theory that predicted, if you knew specific facts about the person, and there was a theory that predicted that in particular they were especially likely to get for the fact to obtain, then the fact obtaining with respect to them, it'll be evidence for that theory. So I agree that if theism predicted, if there was some reason conditional on theism to think this universe is especially likely, like if this universe has some features that you think are especially likely on theism, then that would be evidence for theism. But if you agree, multiverse and theism make it equally likely that there would be some universe that's life permitting, then the question is, so what about this universe makes it so that, like, what features of this universe do you think make it so that are more probable given theism than given the multiverse? Given that we've already granted that there will be some kind of life permitting universe, so then it's not clear what about this universe is likelier. Now, maybe I think the idea is supposed to be, well, it's this one, but I don't think it being this one. I think that that's the error I was talking about before, where it's like in the case where you're summoned into one of two hotels, one big one and one small one, and you say, oh, well, on theory one, I'd be guaranteed to be summoned into this one. Well, on theory two, I could be summoned into any of the rooms. When you take into account your uncertainty about which one this one is, then it isn't actually true that the probability that you're summoned into this one is higher given the single room, given theism, than the multiverse hypothesis.
Yeah, just so quickly give a shout out to conversations with Kenny Boyce and with Miles Donahue. He's done some really excellent stuff on this, and it's conversations with him and reading his stuff that's dragging me around to thinking, yeah, maybe, even though this isn't not where he's heading, but maybe there is some kind of confirmation here. So I just felt I should throw in some credit there. Yeah, I'm slightly. What?
Oh, Miles is great. I don't know Kenny as well, but he seemed very smart from
Miles, and got a great channel. Yeah, the only problem with Kenny is he makes me work sending me mathematics to read. But
and Miles has on Richard Carrier, big problem. But
he's what he has on Richard Carrier. What you don't think you should have on?
No, I don't think very highly of Carrier, but I mean it's fine to have on Richard Carrier.
Yeah. Okay, I'm worried maybe the analogy is running out here because I can't make exactly the comparison with the hotel, with the analogies we've been working with, to the contrast between the multiverse and theism I'm trying to make. But the thought is, look, yeah, you seem to be pressing on me. Well, neither theory makes it likely that this universe is the special one. Well, yes and no, right? Neither theory makes it likely that this universe exists, right? It's like, there's no reason to think God's going to create this universe rather than any other. Okay, so they're equal in that regard. But given that this universe exists, what single universe theism makes likely is that this universe is fine-tuned. So given that it exists, that this universe is fine-tuned, whereas multiverse theory doesn't make that likely. So why isn't that an advantage?
This universe
exists. An improbability.
Sorry, this universe exists just entails that this universe is fine-tuned. If you build into part of what it is to be this universe, it having the features that it has.
Well, so I was assuming, can we assume this for the sake of discussion at least, that this universe might not have had the right numbers for life, might not have been fine-tuned?
Right, so here's maybe one way of thinking about a way to make sense of this. Like, just imagine every universe has like a special mark or something, where like it has a little, it has its, it signs its name in a particular way. And then you ask, what are the odds that, the one with this name signature would have given that after you know that the one with this name signature exists, what are the odds that it would have life? Well, the idea is that it's true that given that you have like this universe in that sense exist, the odds it has life are higher given theism than atheism. The odds of this universe existing are higher given a multiverse, because now you have 10,000 rolls of the die to get it rather than just a single one, and so those two will cancel out. So what I think the takeaway is what matters is the number of agents who find themselves in an epistemic position like ours. And if both theories predict one agent who finds ourselves in an epistemic position like ours, then taking into account the total evidence won't favor either theory over the other. And if one theory says lots of agents do, then I think that theory will get favored. But that's more controversial.
I want to know where this is. When you slip into this, I want to know how is this fitting into what we're doing? I mean, how does this fit into the total evidence? The total evidence requirement is, we work with the most specific evidence we have, and we try to make it as probable, make the evidence probable, getting into the specificities if we can. I've identified one specificity of the evidence that.
Sorry. So when you say one specificity of the evidence, what you mean is
that this universe is fine-tuned, given that it exists. That this universe is fine-tuned is.
But I'm saying, right, so it's true that given that this universe exists, the odds it's finally now I don't know exactly how much handle I have on the idea of this universe existing if it's not built in that it's finely tuned. But I mean there are certainly ways of making sense of that. So you can just have that be like you can have just whatever number universe it is, like in temporal ordering. You can be like
633.
Yeah. But then what I'm saying is that the probability that this universe exists is well, if you have it be which number universe it is, then the probability that this universe is finely tuned isn't higher given theism than naturalism, because then you do the thing I described before of you divvy up your probability conditional on theism across all the different universes. Across a multiverse, across all the universes that it might be, and so then taking into account like maybe this universe is universe 2 or 3 or 4, and so you won't then taking into account that'll get about half your probability space, assuming they start.
But why can't I can rigidly designate it, right? I can. Yeah.
But if you rigidly designate it,
say this one, right, and this one. So we're assuming this one exists. We're just taking that as granted. This one exists. Let's call it Bob the universe. Bob exists. We're just giving a proper name for this particular universe. Bob exists. And now our evidence is that Bob is fine-tuned, and we contrast two theories, single universe theism and atheist multiverse. Well, the evidence that Bob is fine-tuned is much more likely on single universe theism than multiverse atheism. Right?
So, but if your evidence is Bob exists, well, I'm saying before you update on the further evidence, you think theism and naturalism are equally likely. So you update on Bob exists, but you don't know which you don't. So you know Bob is this one, but you don't know which of the universes this one is. And so then when you would take.
In what sense?
Sorry. Wait, let me be clear on this. So you're created in a room. Okay, like here's an analogous case. You're created in a room, and there are 100 rooms, and you're created in a random one of them. You're in this one, but you don't know which number this one is. Right. So I think they're in a similar sense. That it's this one, but you don't know in a de re sense that it's this one, but you don't know in a de dicto, I think it is. I get these things mixed up. Which objective description corresponds to this one. And so my point is just, in order to figure out the probability that this one would be exist given multiverse versus single universe? Well, you have to take into account your uncertainty about the objective features of this one, right? So if here's just to give an analogous case. Imagine that for some reason you thought there was strong reason to think that God would create a universe with a purple bunny. And there was also strong reason to think that this universe had a purple bunny somewhere. Then you'd say, well, taking into account, features of this one, like that it has a purple bunny, then I get an update in favor of theism, because it makes it more likely that, when you take into account more specific features about what this one is, then it's likelier. I mean, the question is just what reason is there to think that the odds that this one would be finely tuned is higher given theism than atheism, in a way that doesn't commit you to thinking that that's true in the hotel case that I was giving, where on theory A you're summoned into the one room in the hotel, on theory B you're summoned into a random room in the hotel. In that case, you could similarly say, well, but on theory 1 I have to be in this one, but on theory 2 I could be in any of the rooms.
Yeah, I might have to think about that particular case a little bit to see where my views on this, what they entail about that, and whether that's intuitive or not. I'm unfortunately going to go shortly to prep some teaching and stuff. But so maybe let me have one more go at this, and then you can have the last word. This is fun. I wish I could chat.
Yeah. I feel like at some point we need to schedule like 5 hours for this. We always get to an hour. We haven't settled it.
I don't think this is ever gonna. Yeah, I want the bloody answer on this, and I'm honestly open-minded. I've potentially changed my mind a little bit as I've been discussing today, and I just want the bloody answer. I want to what's driving me ultimately. It's not like I want God to win or something. I want to know what is going. It seems clear that in the basic casino case you can't infer a full casino, and in the summoning one you can. What is the difference? How do we understand the difference?
Sorry, just briefly, what do you make of my diagnosis of the three?
Actually, this fits with what Miles might have persuaded me of. And yeah, I might be happy with that. But okay, so but conditional on reading stuff from Kenny. But now what I'm not persuaded on from you is why. Look, let's come back to the discussion we were having. It seems to come to like, how do you know something? When do you count as knowing that something exists? So, I mean, do I know you, Matthew? What does it mean? Do I know you? I know what you look like and some characteristics. Now, but you might have. Suppose you have a perfect duplicate on another planet. Maybe we live in a mirror universe, a symmetrical universe where everything in one half of the universe is duplicated on the other. Then in what sense do I know Matthew as opposed to twin Matthew in the other universe? Well, all I can say is I know this guy, and I don't grasp your individual defining essence, if there is such a thing. And I can still say I know this guy, and that is something I know, and that is part of my evidence. You seem to me to be saying, this is the last thing I'm going to say, and then you can have the last word. You seem to be saying, like, the evidence, if all I know is it's this universe is the one that's fine-tuned, and I don't know its unique defining essence or which number it is or whatever. I just know it's this one. Then it doesn't count. It doesn't count. And I don't see what the theoretical basis to that is. It's still part of my evidence that this universe is the one that's fine-tuned. And it's part of my evidence that single universe theism makes more probable than atheist multiverse theory. So why doesn't that mean one theory wins? Okay, that's all. You have the last word.
Oh, sorry. So I didn't mean to suggest that that there's no sense in which you can know that it's this one without knowing further facts. I agree that there are, like, you can know I'm in this room even if you didn't know, like, you couldn't pinpoint it, in space, assuming there's like an infinitely big universe, you couldn't pinpoint which of the physically identical instances you're in. So there's a perfectly good sense in which it happens. The question is, when we're doing probabilities of there being this universe, why think that this universe is likelier given fine-tuning than given a multiverse? And I don't see a reason to think that. I mean, if you just say it's whichever one this one is, well, just whichever one this one is, there's no reason to think that's true, that's likelier given theism than naturalism, unless you fill in some features that you think are likelier given theism than given naturalism.
Given that it exists, given that this universe exists, it's likelier that it's going to be fine-tuned on single universe theism than atheist multiverse.
But I guess so. If you don't build in, if you think part of existing doesn't entail that it's life permitting, because you're just building in some like much more minimal thing about it, that it exists. Well, then the naturalist should say, okay, but the probability that it exists is higher given the multiverse than given theism, because after all, we haven't at that point built in that it has agents or anything like that. And so if we don't build any of that in, if we just build in some like very bare, if we just say like whichever one this one is, well, the multiverse means that there are a lot of universes, and so for any particular one, absent building any specific features, the odds of it existing are higher given a multiverse.
All right, I have not done what I said I'd do, but let me let you have the last word. But let me say something concessionary, so then it's okay me breaking my promise. Yeah, so you're saying like, well, multiverse theory might have an advantage because it makes it more likely that this universe exists. If the more universes there are, the more likely it is that this one. And that's what Kenny's trying to press on me, and I'm sort of unsure about that. So, but maybe that's right. Okay, maybe that's right. Maybe that's an advantage to the multiverse over theism, that it makes it more likely that this universe exists. Well, but that doesn't discount what I'm saying, that there's it. Okay, but then there's this other advantage to theism. Given that this universe exists, it's more likely to be fine-tuned. And then I don't know. I don't know how you'd have to go through the maths.
Well, no. Inevitably, the probabilities will exactly cancel out.
I know. Well, we're thinking about it in a different way in that case.
Yeah. Okay, I guess. Sorry. Well, I'll just say I think then it's relevantly like the summoning case, where you're summoned into a random room in the casino. Where you're summoned into either a random room in the big hotel or in the small hotel. In the similar case there, you could say, when it comes to this one, given that this one on the theory that there's only one room, given that this room exists, the odds that it would they would be the odds I'd be in it, given that it exists, are a lot higher. And yeah, that's right. If you hold into account like the fact that this one exists, but then when you take into account your uncertainty about which one this one is, okay, yeah. Anyways, I think yeah. Sorry, I will let you have the last word, because now
you're wrong. That's my last word. You're wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Philip, thanks so much for coming on. Always a pleasure. Always fun to discuss these things.
I should remove the slides. Why have I had the slides up all that time? Right. Yeah, that was really fun. Thank you. Good luck with choosing graduate school and everything.
Thank you.
Come to
Good
the
luck.
UK. We can hang out.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
Not too often.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks for watching, everyone. I guess we're all on the recording.
Be good.